With a block, paving or wood appearance, Artevia Print is a decorative imprinted concrete. The variety of designs using these molds combined with the range of pigments means you can have an original and customized product.
Like the whole Artevia range, you first rake the concrete out and then strike it off with a straight edge. The aim is to have as much slurry as possible on the surface. Unlike the other Artevia products, where the aim is to have as much stone as possible on the surface, here it's the opposite. The aim is to have a fair bit of surface slurry. You can therefore tamp the concrete a lot. The colouring is done on the surface only, meaning you're going to use a pigment hardener that you'll dust onto the surface of the concrete to give it a colour.
Artevia Print Integral Colour, mass coloured in the ready mix plant, now means that you can miss out this step if you wish.
You do an initial dusting in which you add about half the total quantity. So if you're going to use 5 kilos, you apply about 2 or 2.5 kilos. When you've done the first dusting, you let the powder impregnate into the concrete a bit and then float it off with our aluminium float. Just once over, there and back, to impregnate the powder well into the concrete. You repeat this operation 2, 3 or 4 times until there is a perfectly even colour. You can also create a nuanced effect. To do this, you use a large proportion of a single pigment and then use another colour in the final dusting phase to create a nuanced effect. You really can customize the colour of the concrete. The evaporation suppressant plays a very important role in Artevia Print. When there's very little humidity, when you have a very dry environment, the evaporation suppressant really comes into its own. It prevents a phenomenon called crusting on the surface of the concrete. In other words, it means your concrete won't be very hard on the surface and flexible underneath. You apply the release agent just before starting the imprinting with the molds. Its role is simply to prevent the mold sticking to the concrete. That's where the problem lies with Artevia Print. The operator tends to apply the molds by feel. The concrete must be neither too hard nor too soft. You have to check the pressure you apply to the mold properly to make sure you don't deform the concrete too much. What's also important when you lift the molds is to lift them as flat as possible. The aim is to avoid creating spalling in the corners of the molds.
When moving the molds, you always take the one furthest back and bring it forward to place it against a mold that is already in position.
At the sides, you use flexible molds, as flexible molds often overlap the framing, and there's more freedom to use these molds for hand application. It's true that with this type of concrete, the finish is fairly important. It's important to make sure the edges are finished properly. That's why you use flexible molds on the edges. I use a tool called a jointer to finish off the joints that haven't been created properly with the molds. Now we're going to cut the expansion joints. You have to remember to cut the expansion joints at the latest 48 hours after the concrete has been placed.
After
that, there's a big risk of cracking. For the depth of the cut, it should be about 1/3 of the total thickness of the concrete.
souvent, c'est entre deux moules.
Some concrete often comes up between two molds and the excess is removed.
Et on enlève cette surépaisseur. En règle générale, voilà.
As a general rule, this joint cleaning operation must be done between 24 and 48 hours.
Il faut procéder au
The release agent must be swept up.
du décoffrant, parce que le décoffrant est une poudre hydrophobe qui ne se mélange pas.
The release agent is a hydrophobic powder that doesn't mix with water. You have to sweep up as much of the powder as possible and then go over the surface with a high-pressure washer.
Karcher haute pression, laveur haute pression en surface. Le vernissage, vous avez
The
deux.
sealing, there are two possible finishes, a matte finish or a gloss finish, as the customer chooses.
Le choix du client.